didn't want the press gallery, good people of the Fourth Estate, to be deprived of a post-cab press conference. So as usual, I've stepped into the breach to do what I can for our great democracy. I wanted to start just by shining a light on a quiet revolution that has happened in New Zealand policy. And that is the extraordinary acceleration of overseas investment consents and their processing times. When we first came into government, it was taking on average 71 days to process an overseas consent. Today, it is taking an average of 73 days. That means that we have halved the time for people who make an application and want to come and invest, send money to our country and take a bet on New Zealand's future. One of the effects of that is that the number of investments made in New Zealand is at an all-time high. The financial year just finished in June saw 230 different consents issued for overseas investments, and that was the highest, the second highest having been the year right before that, the year to 24-25, which was 204 consents, the year just past 230. This is because we've made a concerted effort to speed up the administration of overseas investment. We've also changed the law so that with the new 15-day fast track, we can see consents done as rapidly as 5 days. And indeed, for fast-tracked consents, we're now seeing 94% done within 5 business days. For those buying $5 million houses under the AIP, we are processing consents in an average of just 3 days. And I shine a light on this because it's an example of what can be done with strong policy intent and a commitment to getting more money into our country. I'd also like to draw your attention to something else we've released recently, which is specialised guidance for supermarkets, rolling out the red carpet for those who would like to establish a supermarket competitor in New Zealand. We will issue them a standing consent so that they can buy as many sections of land as they may need to establish a full network of supermarkets. And we're doing this because with all the talk about breaking up and punching down on our supermarket operators, what we ultimately need to do to get justice and affordable prices at the checkout is to remove the rules that keep the duopoly in place, because people no longer believe and no longer accept that we should have 2 companies allowed to charge their family whatever they would like. That guidance makes it crystal clear to anybody who's even thinking about coming to New Zealand, that New Zealand is now a place that is absolutely open for business, and particularly open for the supermarket business. So I'm sure there's other things that you'd like to talk about, but I felt that a bit of good news where a part of government is working very well and it is to the benefit of New Zealanders becoming wealthier is a very positive thing.
Minister, the government's, I guess, rolled out the red carpet a number of times before, including by giving supermarket companies the ability to make fast-track applications, and it passed that. That was the reason for giving urgency to a raft of amendments to the fast-track law in November and December. As of yet, 7 months later, it appears there have been no applications. Was urgency necessary in that situation, and is the fact that there have been no applications there, that the previous measures haven't brought any competitors to New Zealand, isn't that evidence that essentially this is going down the wrong track? The removal of red tape is not doing the trick?
Well, just because it hasn't worked yet doesn't mean it's not a good idea. I don't think anyone would argue that we should keep in place the red tape that maintains the duopoly and raises prices for Kiwi households. It may be that we've managed to lead a horse to water but not made them drink just yet, but we remain resolute that if we remove all of the barriers to more competition, then we will find that there are people out there, perhaps an Aldi, perhaps somebody else, who sees New Zealand as being an attractive place to do business. So we know that if we try, we may fail, but we're certain that if we don't try, we'll definitely fail.
Has any overseas supermarket company told you that's the issue, it's red tape? You know, we would come here if you change this or that regulation. I mean, if not, why aren't they here?
I think it's because if you look at the challenge that you face establishing a network of supermarkets, you can't make money or be competitive if you have just one. You have to have a network, usually a distribution centre that pushes goods out to a number of different sites, and in order to do that you need to be able to buy more than one at a time. Now, if you have to find sites, then apply for overseas investment consent, and then find another site and get consent for that one, it's a pretty torturous process. What we're doing here with standing consents, what we're doing by publishing guidance that puts it up in bright lights that we want you here, we are making it all the more tempting for people to come. So you can certainly say, well, because it hasn't happened yet, you shouldn't bother, but I believe that we need to keep on removing red tape until it does happen.
Did LD already signal that they weren't interested in coming here?
Yeah, but you know, sometimes businesses change management, sometimes economic circumstances change, sometimes they may just be waiting for political stability. Perhaps they're watching closely the New Zealand election.
So you're just hoping, is that you're just hoping that they might change their mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why would you not be hopeful that things will get better for New Zealanders? Just because something hasn't succeeded to date doesn't mean it's not a good strategy, and it doesn't mean that it's not going to succeed in the future.
Is there kind of a model case of demonopolisation somewhere maybe in New Zealand's history or somewhere else that you're looking for to get inspiration for how to carry this out? I mean, for telco breakups, whatever last really big one in New Zealand.
I think in the case of the telco breakup, you had enormous public investment. That, of course, was not really a breakup. It was effectively a bribe to separate. I can't quite see how that same strategy would apply with supermarkets unless you were prepared to perhaps invest in distribution centres or something similar. I don't think that's on the table. It wouldn't be wise for a government to do that. On the other hand, I just look at the history of New Zealand getting smarter and better businesses has typically happened because people have been prepared to bring their skills and their money here and take a chance. That's really the whole history of our country, and we hope that will continue with supermarkets.
So there's not a model from overseas even of kind of a successful demonopolisation or de-duopolisation of a sector?
Well, I think what you look at in other countries is that they have bigger markets, and so they have more players. We can't make our market bigger, or at least not quickly. Some of us doing everything we can, but not quickly. And therefore, we need to ensure that we remove any other barriers that are within our control, particularly the issues that we have around too hard to get a resource consent. You know, resource management reform's critical. 28 years to open the Wairau Park Pack and Save, that's a disgrace. Overseas investment, we used to be basically telling people go away. Now we've had this quiet revolution. So all of the conditions are being created. But it's true, you know, there are people who will say, well, you can only create the conditions, we know, but at least we're creating them. Tom.
Over the weekend there were a number of different strikes going back and forth from Iran and the US. Are you potentially worried that the escalating conflict, you know, in the cases of be it food prices, oil prices, etc., could continue to force those up for Kiwis?
Very worried about the impact. You know, over the last few years, many sacrifices have had to be made by New Zealanders, and it's hurt when the light at the end of the tunnel was closed off by events beyond our shores. For the last few weeks, last month or so, it's felt like the light was back on and that we were going to have a good second half of the year. I just hope that these recent events in the Strait of Hormuz are not the flickering of that light off again, because a lot of people have had enough, and that's why we as a government and as a country indeed say we want to see a return to peace. It is in nobody's interest to have continued fighting right at the stranglehold of the world's energy supply.
Has New Zealand been able to find sources for oil that don't rely as heavily on the Strait of Hormuz? Are we better placed now to deal with the closure?
Well, there's no question that one of the big changes, and I think one of the impressive stories of the last sort of 6 months or so, is the way that oil has rerouted. So the Asian refineries that supply New Zealand, be they in Singapore, Korea, Japan, have started sourcing feedstock from West Africa, the Western US, South America, Canada, places they didn't traditionally buy it from. They've found new sources of oil, and that's why the market has actually worked a lot better than anyone thought it would. However, the market working usually involves higher prices when there's a shortage, and we don't want that. We want to see $2.73.91 like we had last week. We want to see $2.09 diesel like we had last week. We don't want to see those prices going up.
Minister, you called this a post-cabinet presser. Did cabinet meet today?
No, it's just a figure of speech.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The councils in the far north are calling on the government to contribute some money towards some sort of rescue package for the two mills under threat of closure in Kaitaia. Has that come past you, or would the government consider that?
Well, the government hasn't considered that. The relevant minister would be the Minister for Regional Development, and it would be up for him to bring that to the Cabinet. That hasn't happened yet, but we'd certainly consider it. But if you look at the incident or the events such as this that have occurred, I think where this government's landed is we can delay the change, but we can't forestall it forever. And therefore, it's critical that we don't end up throwing good money after bad. If you look at the problem we've got with this mussel farm, we were throwing good money after bad for too long. It hasn't got a result, and it's actually absorbed more capital, 94 million, than it's actually sold mussels. That's not a good story, and so we don't really want to go down that track if we can avoid it.
What do you make of New Zealand First Minister Mark Patterson jetting off to India for a week to talk about wool after New Zealand First just opposed the free trade agreement?
Well, success has many fathers. I think it's really positive that one of our ministers is already going overseas to promote the opportunities of the India Free Trade Agreement. I always thought that, like the Chinese FTA, like the TPP, the people who jumped around about a trade agreement would eventually come round and see its benefits. But I've got to be honest, even I didn't think it would happen this quickly.
The press release didn't make mention of the free trade agreement. What did you make of it?
Let me fill in the details. Wool is currently tariffed at 2.75%. That will be gone on day one when this free trade agreement comes into force. And as the wool industry have said, it's not the money that matters. It's the admin, and it's also the signalling. So this free trade agreement is going to be great for so many sectors, from honey to wine to apples, but it's also going to be great for wool, an industry that has had some real challenges with demand lately. So I see it only as a win-win, and we're in full support of Minister Mark Patterson going to extol the virtues of the India Free Trade Agreement over in India.
New Zealand First has voted in support of at first reading, despite it containing clauses on UNDRIP and the Paris Agreement. Are those both things that ACT would be seeking to remove from the FTA in a committee stage or things like that, or are you happy to vote through an FTA that has two things that ACT is opposed to?
Well, first of all, the agreement itself is signed, so the ratification document can't change that. The ratification legislation can't change the signed agreement. I just make the point that New Zealand First never opposed the free trade agreement for those reasons. They opposed it for other reasons relating to immigration. They discovered those reasons later. They did, however, support the UAE and Gulf states trade agreements, which had similar clauses in them. So I don't worry too much about going back and forth on these details. I worry about the overall outcome, and that is enormous gains in trade. And so far as UNDRIP goes, the text of the agreement says that the states affirm the United Nations Declaration, but with reservations that both parties hold. And as the Trade Minister said in the first reading speech, the reservations the New Zealand government holds on UNDRIP is that it is non-binding and has no domestic effect. He said that in the first reading speech as a signal to anybody in the future who might be trying to interpret what the trade agreement means. So while we'd prefer it wasn't in there, we're comfortable it's not going to affect how New Zealanders live. You can make similar arguments around the Paris Agreement. Thomas.
Back in 2020, the Remuneration Authority wrote that the parliamentary super scheme might be slightly not fit for purpose in the modern era, and that MPs should be transitioned to KiwiSaver. That recommendation seems to have been dropped during the pandemic. What do you think about the idea of transitioning MPs' retirement entitlements to KiwiSaver?
Well, first of all, I don't have an objection to that. I mean, I'm not personally in KiwiSaver, but it doesn't make a huge difference to me. When I read about that in the media this morning, I didn't realise that had happened back in 2020. It was a pretty wild time for a lot of different reasons. But in principle, I don't see the problem with it. I do just raise one matter with you that I was advised earlier today that there are 178 public servants, unelected, paid more than a cabinet minister. There are 3,028 public servants, unelected, paid more than a member of parliament. So while there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the people that you can see and vote out, if you're worried about the size of government and the excesses of it, I think it's critical that in a democracy we equally shine a light on the level and size of payments and the number of people that are unelected that you can't vote for, who tend to not have the same level of scrutiny.
Are there particular issues with entitlements for top public servants or people in, I suppose, the wider state sector? Are there issues in that area that you want to draw particular attention to?
No, I'm talking total remuneration, and I just make the point that ultimately, whether you call it pension, whether you call it salary, and this will be true with any compulsory KiwiSaver debate, there is a total amount of remuneration available to a worker. How it's divided up ultimately doesn't make a big difference, but when you look at the remuneration available across the public sector, I just think it's important in a democracy that we keep our emphasis on the unelected as well as the elected.
Would you be re-inviting Tesco, Lidl and Aldi to explore the fast-track opportunity again?
We won't be explicitly inviting them, but it will now be clear for all to see that we are rolling out the red carpet. We publish this guidance not because it changes what the rules are, but because we just wanted it to be perfectly clear to anybody that this country is open for business, supermarket competition especially.
Are you guys still doing much work on this, on trying to get like other, international big supermarkets to come here? Because there hasn't been much information on it since it was announced last year.
Well, ultimately it's up to one of them to make the application, so we can't stop them, or we can't force them to apply, but we can stop stopping them by removing red tape, which is what we've done.
How concerned are you about Monday's China's ballistic missile that was shot into the South Pacific, and the fact that China's formal line on it is that countries shouldn't read into it and it's normal?
Well, I'm deeply concerned. I mean, they're well aware that this is a nuclear-free zone joined by all of the countries in the region. They're well aware that it's normal to give a lot more notice, not just a few hours' notice, and yet they've launched a nuclear-capable missile with only a few hours' notice right into this nuclear-free zone. I think that they will ultimately pay a price in this, because I've spent a lot of time attempting to persuade people that they are a friend to the many nations of the South Pacific. This is not how friends treat each other, and I contrast that with the warmth that we've seen with Prime Minister Modi over the weekend. I don't think he could have had that sort of warm reception had India been firing missiles into the South Pacific.
Do you think Monday's missile will damage New Zealand's relationship with China?
Well, we've been very clear that we don't believe this is how friends treat each other, and it's for them to reflect on what sort of relationship they'd like to have, because you can't have it both ways. You can't say we are a good friend and fire missiles around somebody's country when they've politely said this is a nuclear-free zone. Secondly, friends usually give each other a bit more notice.
The Foreign Affairs Minister made some strong comments this morning about the China missile. He quoted Mao saying that this should be met with steel and resistance. Do you agree with that approach from New Zealand's perspective, having quite a sort of tough line in condemning it and I guess putting up a steel and resistance front to this sort of action? Well,
absolutely, and look, let's not kid ourselves, the world is changing. You see the Ocean of Peace agreement between Australia and Fiji. It's highly likely that we will soon join that. You see our commitment in the Defence Capability Plan. I'm proud that our government is doubling defence expenditure over the next 5 years. This is all, in one sense, unfortunate, but let's be clear that we are responding to a changing world, and yes, we will meet them wherever they'd like to meet us.
The missile launch, which came a few hours after that Australia-Fiji pact, was calculated and timed in relation to that pact being signed, or was it just a coincidence that it happened a few hours afterwards?
Well, I don't like to speculate about other countries' motivations. I think they need to be asked that question. But what is clear is that you have to choose. You can either be a warm friend, the kind of friendship that we've seen with the Prime Minister of India, or you can fire missiles at people. You can't have both.
Would you
you expect to brief the opposition on joining that pact if you were to do so?
I imagine that's not a decision that the Cabinet's taken, but I would imagine that would be the norm. And obviously at this point, Cabinet hasn't considered it. We've only given a provisional approval that we would negotiate and seek to join it. But certainly, I would think once a deal was on the table, it would be wise for New Zealand, as in all of us, to make it as bipartisan as possible.
How would that agreement operate if there was a coup in Fiji that's happened in recent history?
Well, there's always different political systems that we agree with and don't agree with. The question would be, do we have a government in Fiji that we can do business with and that we can have all of the needs of the alliance met? Obviously, they have had a checkered political history, but in many ways been a good friend of New Zealand with a lot of person-to-person and trade connections.
On the China FTA you were talking about earlier, after that was finalised, Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters, who disagreed with the agreement, undertook to not criticise it while overseas, while offshore, unless kind of very directly asked. He was not going to go out and do speeches about it. Would you expect that current Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters undertakes the same kind of promise that onshore, obviously, politicians are politicians, but offshore, when travelling as Foreign Affairs Minister, he should no longer be talking about the problems of the new FTA in his view?
I think when you go overseas as Foreign Minister, you're on Team New Zealand and you should be representing Team New Zealand rather than your own specific interest. But I don't place expectations on people. Ultimately, it's up to the voters to judge people's behaviour.
Alan Clark placed that expectation on Minister Peters. Would you think it would be appropriate for the Prime Minister, acting or otherwise, to place that appropriation on Mr Peters this time?
Like I say, I don't place expectations on people because I know that ultimately others will judge. So he's certainly welcome to behave that way, but people will be watching and they'll be asking the question. We send you over to represent Team New Zealand. Are you on the team? Simple question.
Submissions on move-on orders today, various submitters calling them morally indefensible, unnecessarily a breach of fora, don't address the real causes of poverty. Did the government underestimate the depth of feeling there would be from the public in opposition to these move-on orders?
No, I'm not surprised at all. There'll be a whole lot of people that come out and submit against move-on orders, but what you won't hear from is the people who are scared when they lock up their shop at 6 o'clock in the dark because of the people milling around intimidating them. You won't hear from the people who might have walked down Queen Street but decided that actually they'll go to Sylvia Park because Sylvia Park effectively has move-on orders, it's private property. You won't hear from the people who are feeling a little bit down about our country because you can't even go to some of the most iconic shopping precincts without seeing a place where bad behaviour has driven out the way that most people expect to behave. So I'm not surprised that the usual suspects will be out there complaining, but I do believe that there are people out there who are not being heard, but they've had enough of the behaviour they've had to put up with.
Those people also have a right to submit to a select committee as well, so why are we not hearing from them?
Because they're working.
Question from a colleague. Are you aware of any supermarkets internationally expressing interest in coming to New Zealand, but subsequent to the RFI process that was run, I think, last year? Has anything happened since then that you're aware of?
Yeah, there's been expressions of interest, and for various reasons they haven't gone all the way through. In one case, there was some controversy over controversy is too strong a word, but there was a question over whether the labelling laws could patch over into New Zealand or whether their food would have to be labelled the same way as us. That's one of the reasons the Ministry for Regulation has been working on labelling laws, because they actually create a lot more friction in markets than you might think. However, New Zealand finds itself in a difficult position on labelling because we are part of FSANZ, that's the Australia-New Zealand Food Safety Agreement, and if we want to stay on that, which is very important to New Zealand, then we also can't accept foods from outside. That is an ongoing discussion between New Zealand ministers and Australian ministers, so I believe that in time that will be resolved, but certainly when Andrew Hoggard's been on those meetings, it's him and like 6 or 7 Australian ministers and it's been a challenging to get change over the line there.
And this issue regarding that joint Australia and New Zealand labelling regulation, that issue was insurmountable enough for this supermarket to say no thanks, sorry, we can't come in until that's sorted.
Well, I wouldn't want to say that was the only reason or the complete reason, but it's certainly that's one of the sticking points, and it's one that the Ministry for Regulation is trying to knock down, just like resource consenting, just like overseas investment.
From the same colleague, there's a line in one of those cabinet papers which said, I think it comes from officials, that said that they feel that it is unlikely that an international competitor will come in while the market settings are what they are. What, to your knowledge, are the market settings that are the ones that are making New Zealand such a hostile environment for foreign supermarkets to enter the market?
Well, it's the ones that I've mentioned. So first of all, you've got labelling issues we are addressing with some friction with our relationship with FISANZ in Australia. There is the resource management issue that it can be very difficult to get the development done in a timely fashion, a lot of delays in consenting there. And then there is the issue of overseas investment, where I think we've done about as much as we can, short of putting a big sign at Cape Reinga saying, can't bring your supermarket here.
I was looking at 21 global supermarket giants, just confirming all of those were explored and none worked out.
I think there were 21 that were invited, but again, you can lay out the carpet and invite people, and you can keep. But to say that they explicitly rejected it is not quite true. I think they were invited, but they may not have explicitly rejected it.
Is still ongoing?
Not right now, but we got to solve this problem. It's going to take determination. It's going to take ongoing grit. We're certainly not planning to give up.
Last week,
yes, sir.
Last late on Thursday afternoon, the Associate Justice Minister announced that the government was walking back its ban on crypto ATMs. I'm sure you'll be aware, like the Ministerial Advisory Group on that was really recommended banning these machines for facilitating money laundering, that sort of thing. But in her statement, Justice Minister said the advice that was taken to Cabinet was that they've been presented with evidence that shows that this can be mitigated. I was wondering if you were able to speak a little bit to what the evidence was that suggested that you can place restrictions on these machines, but not facilitating that sort of illicit behaviour.
Yeah, sure. If you look at traceability of illicit funds, crypto ATMs actually have really great traceability. They're electronic, they can track every transaction, and they're prepared to share that data with the authorities as well. So if you look at all the ways that a person could get illicit funds in and out of New Zealand, it turns out that a crypto ATM is not a very effective way to do that. So regulated crypto ATMs will remain, our AML obligations will be met, and we won't be seen, as we risked being seen, as a Luddite country that's not open to new technology.
The public service comments you made about transparency in public sector pay. The Commission makes it quite easy to find out what chief executives are paid. Do you think they should go further and tell everyone who is getting paid more than a cabinet minister?
Well, I mean, we got that information from the Public Service Commission website. That's not, official or secret information. They could go down another level. I do think at some point you need to find a balance between wanting capable people to work in the public sector and giving them their privacy. So usually they report bands of salaries and how many people are in that band, so you can get some idea, but you don't get down to an individual's privacy. I think that's probably about right, but I just make the point. There is an enormous amount of emphasis on elected officials, and when we deserve that, and we're comfortable with that. But given my particular brand of politics, I'm interested in shrinking all the government, not just the ones that you know about.
How much money could be saved if the REM amounts of those public servants you mentioned were cut down to a level that you were happy with? Have you identified roughly how much money could be saved in terms of that expense?
Well, put it this way. You look at the size of government in this country. We got 43 departments. I gave a speech about shrinking government down to 19 departments, and my good friend Mr. Osawa was there, the Japanese ambassador. He said, "Do you know we have 15?" So he thinks that we've gone soft, aiming for 19. And I would say that actually the scope for reducing government and making it smaller and more efficient is to save at the very least billions of dollars, perhaps tens of billions.
Should there be a cap on how much someone can earn?
No, I think you should be prepared to get the best person to do the job effectively, because that can save you a lot of money too. So I'm not into micromanagement and controls, but I am into having a really clear idea of what things does the government need to do that can't be done any other way, and scrub the rest.
So to be clear, do you have a problem with the public sector hiring people at market competitive rates for leading?
No, I've always supported that. But the basis of my comments, or the purpose of my comments, was just to make clear to people that you may be worried about the 120 members of parliament you know about and can vote out if you like. There's 3,028 public servants who are paid more than a member of parliament at base salary, and there are 178 who are paid more than a cabinet minister. Makes you think.
Do you think personally, though, that those 178, that they shouldn't earn more than the cabinet minister, that the cabinet minister's salary should be where the cut-off is?
No, I don't necessarily think that either. All I'm saying is that I think we sometimes look at the tip of the iceberg, which is the elected people you can see, and we forget just how big the government is doing other things, and far too many things with too many departments. And that's why, to step back into my act role for a moment, my party is campaigning for a smaller, more efficient government. We have a crazily large government for a very small country.
Just as acting Prime Minister and changing tack, on the defining gender bill, do you know if that will be treated with a conscience vote?
I couldn't tell you that offhand. That's ultimately a decision for the Speaker, but it would require a political party to say that it was unsure about maintaining its numbers, so it's possible that a party would do that.
Does ACT have a preference with your ACT leader hat on?
We're for the bill. We are tired of pretending we believe it's time to have this kind of clarity in law.
Hat on, could you clarify
This is acting PM, right? Back to ACT.
What is ACT's position on the government's ban of social media for under 16s?
Look, we recognise that parents are under siege from a whole lot of things, especially social media competing viciously for children's attention, and that the effects of it are very serious. Children and their parents, for that matter, need help. I just do not believe that a ban on social media enforced by the government is the effective help that they need and they deserve, and I base that on its failure to be effective overseas. I base that on the fracas that we saw briefly at the start of last week over virtual private networks being banned, and I think that really exposed the Achilles heel of this whole ban project. What it showed is that any system that is strong enough to stop a motivated teenager is also strong enough to take away the privacy and internet freedom of adults. And why? Because we all know teenagers are better at using the internet than adults. That's one of the fundamental problems, and I hold that position as ACT leader. So far as the government goes, it will have to consider a paper and take a position in the near future.
Will ACT be agreeing to disagree with introducing this bill?
Well, depends if it goes ahead at all. That's the question.
Are you comfortable with the AA resource? Are you comfortable with the Ministry of Education resources being used to develop it?
Well,
Not being a National Party bill, but only supported by National.
Well, let's just see. I mean, Cabinet agreed for the work to be done, so that is a collective responsibility that we all have as members of the government. We did not agree that it would necessarily be supported, and I was comfortable with that position because, as I say, parents are under siege. Workday 6 of the school holidays just coming to an end now, 4 days to go. And so they do need help on this matter. I'm just not sure that what's being developed is the help they need or deserve.
Are you worried about a National Labour kind of coalition on this one, a bit of a stitch up there?
I'm worried about a National Labour coalition on anything. Some would say we've had that for a long time. But on this issue too, look, I mean, I'm not worried about the politics. I'm worried about the policy outcome for children. And I fear, if you look at Australia, I was advised some figures that Before the ban, 84% of children were using these sites, and now after the ban, it's 78%. Now, if that's what success looks like, then we've got a really big problem, because of those 78% still using it, they've been told that it's against the law. They're less likely to tell a trustworthy adult if they get in trouble, and they may be in greater danger. And that's just one of the problems that we have. Folks, I'll do a couple more if there's needed, but otherwise it's...
On that about the hypocrisy in the law, on the hypocrisy in the law, are you in support of the Green Party's push to put a Good Samaritan law in, so that when you call someone to call in a drug overdose, you cannot then be charged with supplying with drugs or with possession of drugs yourself? It's a similar matter about hypocrisy and not being able to call in for help when you're breaking the law.
Well, I'm not sure where it's hypocrisy, but I haven't looked at their proposal. The question I always ask about things like that is how many people will use it and how many people will abuse it. I have a fear that it will become somehow abused, but if I could look at the legislation and work through the problem, then I'm not for the government locking up anyone more than we need to lock up.
Finally, on the ATM point, like I take the point you made, saying sort of if you want to try to launder money or transfer it overseas, one of these ATMs is a bad place to try to do it. But I'm finding it hard to match that with what the Ministerial Advisory Group on Serious Crime and the Police's own Financial Intelligence Unit is saying about these machines, saying that they should be banned, they are a hotbed for this sort of stuff. So, I mean, the disconnect there, I mean, why are they taking such a stern view on this and the government's taking its stance?
Well, the police frequently take the most punitive approach on issues because it's in their interest. They're not here to stand up for people's freedom or the workability of the economy. They're there to basically make it hard for anyone to offend for any reason whatsoever. So I'm not surprised that they would take that view. So far as the Ministerial Advisory Group, I haven't seen their reasoning, but I have seen very compelling presentations from people who are actually experts in crypto ATMs, and they will say, look, if you want to launder money, don't do it through one of the most traceable forms there is, and that is using one of our ATMs. All right. Thank you very much, team. Hope you have a great rest of recess.
That some children became really highly attached to the screen-based activity,